Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday edition of A Lunch and Learn. We have the Outpost Venture gang here with us again today. Appreciate you guys coming back and sharing more information about your asset class. It is unique. I feel like we do need kind of Outpost 201, maybe Outpost 301 version classes on this before it's over with, but it's good stuff. So we appreciate you coming back. Dave, I think I'm turning it over to you to run through your material for us today.
Yeah, great, Chad. Really appreciate the time. And I know a lot of the audience may be heavy real estate. And so this, for some people, this may not be a new asset class, for some people it may. And so we just want to kind of lay the groundwork and the thinking, the experiences that we have. But there's no better time than now to invest in dual use technology. We'll talk about that for a lot of reasons, but I think we'll enjoy our time together today. Appreciate everyone taking time, the audience out there. I know it's lunch, so it's supposed to be a little bit more casual, and so we'll be casual. Feel free to chime in, ask questions, or we'll hold questions to the end as necessary. And like I said, we'll keep it fairly light today. I start off here with kind of opportunity abounds. I'm Dave Harden. I'm the managing partner here at Outpost Ventures. Ben Strub, the CFO, is on with us here today as well. And we have some really cool advisors, 4-star generals, that type of stuff. And I've just been fortunate in my life, kind of an eclectic background. So a C-17 pilot turned business guy, turned investor. And so gotten to serve the country and fly over the world, but then got into a situation where I was able to build the Air Force's innovation arm known as AFWorks from the ground up, and in doing so kind of built a Shark Tank for the Air Force called Spark Tank. So you'll see a picture there of me and Mark Cuban. Actually, I was on season 10, I believe. So there was a Shark Tank update. We had a maintainer, and he had a grip mat, and his grip mat would hold tools when he was working on the F-16. And so obviously there's applicability to cars and all kinds of stuff. So Mark invested in that along with several other sharks. And so we actually did the Shark Tank update at an innovation hub we wound up building in Las Vegas. So I got to spend 3 hours talking about AI and China and all kinds of cool stuff with Mark Cuban. So an opportunity to really kind of meet great people. David Meltzer, I was a judge on season 2 and 3 of 2 Minute Drill. So it's kind of a Shark Tank-esque show, focused more on the art of the pitch. And so it was neat to see all the small businesses and ideas and what people are thinking about. And really, I'm always struck by the opportunities that are out there that I don't know about. And today we might be talking about an opportunity that you don't know about as well. And then Nolan Bush, now I got a picture of him. He was the founder of Atari. You might not know this. He also founded Chuck E. Cheese. Great story we can save for another time. But we had him as a speaker at a Fusion event, and talking to him a little bit afterwards, but interesting fella. And if you don't know, Steve Jobs was his first employee, and Steve came to him and he said, "Hey, starting this company, it's called Apple, and would love for you to be a part of it. And so I'll give you a third of Apple for $50,000. So with great regret on his face, Nolan talks and says, "I did not invest in Apple." And you can imagine that north of $300 billion today is an area of regret. And so I'm reminded of opportunities that are presented to us that we don't take, or the path less traveled, as they say. And so I'm always cognizant of Nolan's story as I think about the landscape and what's available to us today. We're going to chat a little bit today just about venture capital as an asset class. Like I said, I know we talk a lot about kind of like real estate and maybe like some other deals, but we're going to talk about venture capital today. A unique approach to that, which is dual use technology. and what the characteristics of that are, and our investment thesis, how we look at this space and think about it, how it's been growing over the last 5 years, I say, pretty heavily. And then lastly, just talking a little bit about some of the government matching programs. So when we'll get to it here as we go. Many of you kind of know how venture capital works, but if you don't, you have a company, they might do a friends and family round, they're trying to get some money, and they're getting maybe their product's getting going, and they get to a point where they're ready to kind of raise money from investors. And so they go out to kind of this early stage market of venture capitalists to help them grow. And the idea is to kind of have a series of investors at different risk points pour money into their company, believe in the team, believe in the vision, believe in the business, and then have some kind of exit or secondary sale or IPO. And so in this game, it's about capturing a life cycle of the company and being able to get returns on that, and then get those proceeds back to the investors in a meaningful timeline. So again, this is different in that it's not typically quarterly distributions. This is typically a longer investment horizon, but you get the kind of returns that typically you wouldn't get in any other type of investment. So what we see is early or seed stage companies, and there's venture capitalists that like to write small checks, might be 100, 200K, maybe 500K. And they're aiming for 100x returns. If I make 20 bets, this is going for 1 or 2 huge winners, or as they call them, unicorns, right? And so it's a little bit of a betting game. You're going to have a lot of failures along the way because it is early. They don't have traction yet, but you're betting on a breakthrough technology or a breakthrough team to kind of make your investment. As the company matures, they'll have kind of what they call formally priced rounds in a series A or B. And these are still considered early investors, but the aim is more for about a 10x return, and it's more risk reduced, right? The company's further along, the product is getting to market, the customers are being evolved. And so then we see later stage VCs, and this starts to border in either late stage VC, or if some of you are familiar with the PE market, where private equity is a little bit is late stage, less risky, but you're not going to get as high return, but you won't have as many potential failures as well. And so that's where VCs tend to kind of play in the space, if you will. So in summary, early stage VCs are going to make riskier investments. They're kind of targeting 30+ IRR. Later stage is going to be 20% kind of IRR, but not as much upside, a little bit less risk. So it's interesting in the dual use tech space. And when I say dual use tech, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but it's basically I have a technology that is good for the commercial market. So they have a commercial market, and they're good for the public market or the government market. And so leveraging those two is really an interesting and evolving proposition. The ecosystem has really been booming. When I was at AFWorks, helped start a program with AF Ventures, it's called, which was a matching program to bring in government dollars and private dollars together. Since starting that program over 4 years ago, about $9 billion of private money has come through that. And what's interesting about the proposition is really about the elements that you can play with. So if you see up here, there's been numerous studies done on the top 5 factors for success. So if I invest in a company, what are the top 5 factors across more than 200 companies that were done in the analysis? And you'll see 5 up here. Timing, team and execution. You've always heard team, right? So as we think about investment, we want to look at that team. Do they have a good track record? Do we think they're going to be there? The idea, Have they, kind of drank their own soup, or is this idea truly, kind of going to be game changing? The business model, how are you going to convert that? And then do you have enough capital? Are you going to get to the end game? So all of these obviously are important to the 5 critical factors. But what was interesting is when they did all of the research, and we kind of give away the answer here, the number one factor of success for companies, and thus we parlay that into investing, is timing. And it was interesting because that's not necessarily what you would think off the top of your head, but it makes sense, right? If you launch a business, maybe at the beginning of COVID, that's not very good timing. And I think a lot of times, sometimes we've all seen it where the idea is too early, or maybe the idea is a little bit too late. And so that timing is a little bit off. So what's been cool about the dual use tech space is you can kind of play with timing a little bit, whereas in other areas you can't. And I'll give you an example. We have a company called Red 6. Red 6 does augmented reality. And their main application was, obviously everyone's familiar with virtual reality, but this is augmented reality. And what it means is they're trying to figure out, if I'm flying a plane and it's very expensive as it is now to fly another plane, but you need to fly another plane to train against it. And that's called red air. So they're acting kind of like the enemy, if you will. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that's spent to fly that pretend enemy air. And the challenge is, one, obviously pilots, it takes humans. 2, it's hard for those aircraft to stay up to be truly representative of the latest technology. And 3, it's very expensive. So what Red 6 did is said, hey, within your helmet, you're going to be able to actually be flying the aircraft, but you're going to see a tanker to do air refueling, a Chinese missile, a Russian fighter. And so you can train in your aircraft as you're flying, just as if you're flying against these assets, essentially for half the price, because only you are having to fly. The other aircraft is not having to fly. So this was a major breakthrough. What was interesting is I worked with them. Actually, it was the back of a napkin at the Cosmo Hotel in Vegas, and helped them get their first investor, first revenue. More recently, got a $70 million contract with the Air Force, and recent announcements with Boeing. So they're well on their way to being uber successful. But as we look at that company, early on, what happened is the commercial market wasn't quite ready for augmented reality. I'll give you a couple examples. There wasn't like an Uber taxi yet, right? Because this could drive down training costs for helicopter pilots. There weren't these things that were kind of lined up. And so what was cool is you could take them kind of on a military journey, evolve the product. They get research and development dollars. They're able to kind of lay down this path and essentially almost have 2 liquidation events. So they're eventually going to be in a position where it says, hey, I could kind of sell all of the military contracts and the deals I have there and kind of that IP, and keep the commercial IP, because now the commercial market is ready. We were too early. The timing was too early. And so it's really cool now to see really interesting conversations like, I'm trying to think, I think it's past confidentiality, so I think I can talk about it, but a company like Disney, right? These commercial entities that are now ready to adopt the technology. And so you almost wind up with kind of 2 businesses, and Red 6 got to play with the timing of the market. And typically you don't get to do that. You make an investment. Hey, I missed the timing. Too bad, so sad. So for that main reason, we really like what we get to do and experience in this space. And we run into a lot of people that are like, oh, the SVB and this and the markets and so what we've been finding is that the headwind, the macro headwind, is pretty steep, right? There's an emotional tie to kind of what's going on in the marketplace. But the reality is, as a venture capitalist, when we invest $1 today in something, it's really a bet 5 years from now. And so from our perspective, we're getting to negotiate better valuations for the companies. We're in a market timing that allows us to look 5 years ahead and say, hey, we think at the time that we're going to be looking to liquidate or sell or M&A these investments, we're going to be in really good shape. Okay. And so today's play is actually for the market 5 years from now, not for today's market. And what I thought was interesting is you pull the data and you look at venture capital as an asset class compared to other things you can invest in. It's actually the right time in a tumultuous market to invest in venture capital. So we see during the dot-com crash, VC as an asset class, the average is 16% gain, where essentially it was the inverse if you invested in the S&P or NASDAQ. And so, we see during downturn kind of economies, venture capital is really a smart place to put your money. So we talked a little bit about timing, our early investment, and to get this investment, you want to obviously minimize your return. And so the way we've been able to minimize our return and what we've experienced in dual use technologies by getting these government contracts. So we can actually come in an investment at the time that it's known that the government is also going to put money in. So now as an investor, I know they're not eating into my equity check, right? There's revenue there that you can kind of bank on. And so that gives you kind of an immediate IRR boost and reduces the risk within this VC space. You've heard me mention the term dual use tech, and maybe you have some questions on what is dual use and what isn't. You see the big definition there: commercial applications, government applications. I'll use an example of a company we're working with called Enduralock. And Enduralock's a really interesting company. And it was a neurosurgeon. So a neurosurgeon kind of developed some IP around failure points in back implants. And those tend to be basically joints, as you can imagine, and fasteners. So fasteners would fail over time. So he developed a self-locking fastener and then eventually a self-aligning fastener. I'll talk about what that means here in a couple of minutes. Well, guess what? It turns out that the same thing he invented kind of for the medical application also applies really, really well to airplanes and space vehicles. So in this case, we were able to help get 4 government contracts. They're now poised to replace all the fasteners on the KC-135. So there's 440 in the fleet. KC-135 is a tanker. So imagine it as a big kind of Boeing plane, stick out the back. They pump fuel, can refuel fighters or other big aircraft midair, so they don't have to land somewhere to get fuel. And so huge cost savings, huge maintenance savings, all those good things. Also, when you look at small satellites, if I'm in space, typically I have a robot arm and I got to replace a fastener. And so their technology, if it comes in, let's say at a 30-degree angle, as that fastener is being put in, it self-aligns. So it means I only have to do it once, and even if I'm off at an angle, it automatically figures it out and seats itself perfectly. Because if I'm a little bit off, what happens is it's going to wear over time. I might get moisture. I might get all these things. And so it's going to be a failure point for the spacecraft. And so, I look at a Duralock as kind of a, maybe not the quintessential example, but it's a great example of dual use technology. And happy to explain those more, as you all kind of have questions. We mentioned the way that kind of diversification looks like is these government contracts that provide greater assurance of long-term revenue. And there we go. So I mentioned this program I started called AFWorks, and then what happened is the matching program got built under what's called AF Ventures. And the way it works is a company a young company will say, yeah, I want to do some stuff in, in the Air Force, maybe another service, but primarily the program's in the Air Force. And so they'll come and say, hey, we have a commercial technology. We think this has application to the DoD, to the nation, and we'd like to kind of try it out. So something called an SBIR program, it's Small Business Innovation Research. This is authorities from Congress that have been laid out to entice and allow small businesses to participate in our national tech ecosystem. So think about it as like kind of like a trial, maybe $1 million, $2 million, a couple of years, and say, hey, can we take your commercial tech and make it operationally relevant to fill in the blank? What some end user wants, a flying unit, a special ops unit, an aircraft unit, whatever the case may be. And so if they get kind of traction and it's like, hey, this solves a real problem, they can apply for this matching funds program. And typically it's a multi-year contract. It's 4 years. It's not a grant. It's actually top line revenue for the company. And we've been leveraging this, very successfully. We just recently have come up with a hybrid electric vehicle or hybrid electric plane, aerospace vehicle. Just won that $30 million 4-year contract. We have an AI company just won a $30 million 4-year contract. And so these provide real opportunities for these companies to transition within the DoD, but they're great investment opportunities because it helps reduce the risk. More than 3,000 companies have been backed in this kind of AFWorks model. More than $1 billion in contracts and $2.8 billion of private investments for the contracts. Nearly $9 billion of follow-on investment for companies that participate in this program. I want to kind of go through and, like I said, keep it kind of light and airy. I think as I think about, I'm very passionate that our grandchildren have a future. And that future is really built around how do we get technology to our nation quicker? And we've seen all the news, maybe it's Russia, maybe it's China. And so we take what we do on a daily basis very seriously. We found that there's great opportunities for returns, and you'll kind of see the vision statement there of do good, make money. So we really kind of live that, believe that every day, thinking about how can we kind of make a difference for companies, for investors, and for our nation. And then obviously this is not a nonprofit. So we believe capitalism is well and alive. It differentiates us from many other countries. And so our goal is to get great investor return with mitigated risk. And we believe VC as an asset class, dual use technology, and specifically some of the matching government fund programs that are available do just that. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and pause, Chad, and just open it up. We do have some questions today. Love to answer them.
Awesome.
We're happy to take them offline. If folks would like to reach out to us, feel free. Dave at outpostventures.com. My CFO is on here, Ben Strub, amazing rock star. Ben at outpostventures.com. Please reach out to us. Chad, again, thanks for having us on today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for the info share. Really interesting asset class that you guys are in. Anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I guess maybe to start it off, maybe you can speak towards, the majority of deals that we're getting, sponsors that we work with and vet are, in multifamily most, and then some other of those kind of standard real estate asset classes. Can you give any tips, tricks on what limited partner investors ought to think through as they're trying to vet a deal in your asset class and your business? How best to understand your world and you as a sponsor that can help people think through that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you always have to answer in any type of investment, your risk tolerance, right? And what you're trying to aim for returns. So, we recently had an LP that we have a partnership with Equity Trust. So we have an LP that came into our fund actually with an IRA. And so, they're like, hey, I've lost 40, 50%, right? In my stock. This is like terrible. This is already kind of longer term money, right? I was planning on sitting there. No sense in just taking a bath. I'd rather, I'm willing to take the risk, get a little higher rate of return. And so, they simply kind of, transferred the IRA as an LP into the investment. So I think if you have money already with a longer term horizon, that makes a lot of sense. And then thinking about, some people get really excited about those early moonshots, right? But you have to go in that saying, hey, I can get involved with, maybe some angel groups or some others, take a bet on a few companies, but those aren't risk reduced. And so at least for us, we found kind of this sweet spot of, the company has revenue, the company has investments, they've done contracts with the government, and now they're kind of ready for the next step. And that's the way we've thought about risk reduction. So the other interesting thing, Chad, I think people make a lot of assumptions, especially given our background, that we're very interested in defense companies. I get defense companies all the time. And what I explain to them is we're not a defense only company. In fact, we will not invest if defense is your only market. So we're truly looking for technology that has a good commercial marketplace and good commercial customers, and the government or the DoD is just an additional customer in that commercialization plan. And so those would be our recommendations as you look into this asset class for those types of investments.
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions that have popped up. I'll just read them off to you. First one is, how do you classify dual use differently than a second round or VC?
Yeah, that's great. Daniel, I appreciate the conversation. So obviously we kind of talked about the rounds, right? Our kind of next big investment closed at the end of April with a company called Electra. That's on the tail end of an A round. So Lockheed Ventures came in as a co-investor. That is, typically where we're going to come in is post-seed up to early B. That's just what we kind of, look at in terms of that. So what round they're on doesn't matter much for the dual use technology. The dual use technology piece just has to do with the actual thing that they're selling. Is it artificial intelligence? Is it a fastener? And so, it's kind of more of a classification. Does this product or does this technology fit in getting or solving a government problem? And, like the example I used is does this fit in medical? Are you getting clients, is Tesla a client? Is, are you getting commercial clients making it a commercial product, but you also have applicability for the IRS or the Navy or the Air Force? And so separate from what round it is, that's how we look at the asset class on if the technology or product itself is dual use. Hopefully I answered that question.
Cool. Sounded good to me. Next one is, have any technologies gone full cycle through this program? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think last count, there's about 24 unicorns, in other words, billion-dollar valuations that have gone through the program. In terms of, longer term investment, it is, let's say it's not brand new, but it's fairly new in the sense of it's, about 4 years, 5 years. So, given that, it hasn't had as long of a life cycle as maybe looking at, some other investments, but we actually, Ben did a really good job and the team of pulling all the data. And it's literally like all the companies, so there's 3,000 companies. If you just like sprayed and prayed, in other words, didn't do much due diligence, sprinkle money across all of them, I think it was like a 15% return. And then if you narrowed the thesis and you really did it when they got this matching funds program, you start to, look at, much more aggressive 200% return a year kind of opportunity. So there's enough data now that shows that, this is viable. There's an immediate bump up in the valuation of the companies that participate in the program. And typically we don't wait for, or don't look at an exit for an IPO kind of thing. So for instance, example I gave you with Electra, we'll come in on an A round. We'll probably get our investors out like in a C round and recapitalized. So we look at kind of that 4 to 5 year window of getting returns. So we're looking to be kind of on the ride for a segment of the company's life.
Gotcha. I think that's helpful. Next question was, how many deals do you plan to have in this deal? And then what is the success failure rate that you've modeled to achieve the 20 to 30% IRR? I think you kind of spoke to that, but maybe you can at least talk about how many deals you expect to have in here and maybe expand any on the targeted IRRs that you've mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And today was really just a lunch and learn about kind of VC as asset class and stuff like that. But we do have a fund. We're raising a $120 million fund right now. We're closing between 5 and 10 million as we speak. And in fact, we had several $100,000 come in from a quick talk we did with Left Field. There was so much demand after it. We've opened another TribeVest opportunity that I think is open now until 14 April. The fund itself will invest in 15 to 20 deals, and that capital deployment windows over the next 2 years. In terms of failure rate, we model about a 17% failure rate. So that's the assumption going in, and just deals that die off in that modeling. So hopefully I got to the heart of some of your questions there.
Cool. No, appreciate that. Then next one here is, can you talk about the term of the investment and how returns are calculated? Again, appreciate you expanding on kind of the deal side of things, even though this is a lunch and learn. You can tell the group's interested anyway. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, happy to share more. And like I said, we can take some conversations offline. There is an open TribeVest right now for Left Field investors actually to come into the fund we're raising for. So typically it's a traditional fund. So the fund will run 7 to 8 years, but really we'll deploy most of the capital within 2 years. So this year and next year. And then most of the liquidations are 4 to 5 years kind of from that. So you can expect, again, 4 to 5 years to start to have returns. And it's a typical 80-20 fund. So the capital goes back to the investors when we have a liquidation event. And then 80% of the gains go to the LP investors, 20% to the general partners.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Here's some clarification on the new tribe. It's technically, it sounds like it's supposed to open up next week on the 3rd and run through the 14th, and I believe is correct. So awesome. Just some clarification on that. Yeah. Yep. Then another one is the AF Works program at any risk of being discontinued depending upon which political party is in power?
Yeah, that's a great question. The nice thing is it's pretty cross-cutting, so it's survived a couple different political shifts already. So that's great. The other thing is the SBIR that I mentioned before. That authorization just got reapproved for 3 years last summer. So I would say there's probably no issue for the next 3 years. And at least in this instance of the fund, we basically have a cycle right now that we're getting results from that leads to this next year's round of investments. And pretty much for the fund to be successful, we just need one more round of this matching funds program. So at least, they've already announced it. They're going to, do the next round in the fall. As long as they do that one more round, then in terms of this particular fund, we're not really at a risk of discontinuation, because if they do, we will have already made our investments. The contracts would have already been let. And so no risk to this particular fund if they do shift in another direction. But we don't believe that that's going to happen, at least in the near term. Always subject to some wacky stuff, as you all know. But
yes, indeed. Any other questions out there? Appreciate the ones that have flowed in so far. And, as always, as Dave's mentioned before, the group can feel free to reach out directly to these guys offline and talk to them about any interest you have with the contact information that's on the screen now. So with that, maybe that's we'll do it for today. Oh, here's another. The 2080 split is splitting what? Just trying to get confirmation on the split structure.
Yeah, so that's just the upside of the investment. So typically in VC, there's LPs and a general partner that's kind of managing the fund. So us, typically us is managing the fund. If let's say you put in we make an investment of $1 million, and the exit is at $5 million, and so there's a $4 million net. That $4 million would get split 80% to the investors, 20% of that $4 million profit to the general partner for managing the fund.
Great. Thanks for the clarification on that.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, feel like it's dying down now. Again, if people have other questions, you can feel free to reach out directly to these guys. I won't keep you on any longer than we have to since things are slowing down here, but really appreciate you guys coming on again today and sharing more about the asset class. It's like I said, it takes me a couple times to digest this to get a good feel for it. So appreciate you sharing some more information with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Chad, Ryan, thanks for hosting us today. It's always great to see you guys. And like I said, I'm a little jealous of your broadcast mic there, so I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to up my game and invest in one. So, yeah,
we all got to have goals, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right, appreciate it, Dave. Ben, appreciate both of you guys coming on today and sharing with the group. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great Thursday. Cheers.
All right, you guys too.